Kate Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Time for our Saturday book, and we are on video number 5 of The Invasion of Eden by the wonderful Paul Wallis. And pressed for time, I'm not going to elaborate. If you're new to the book, please go back 2 weeks, check out the first 4 videos, two Saturdays ago, 2 last Saturday. And we're going to start today with video number 5. We're on already chapter 11, which is called Alliances and Sacred Cows. First, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the positive feedback that keeps me motivated to doing this. I too love these books. I think they're fascinating. They're just the right combination of archaeology and UFOs and a little language thrown in. What could be better? Let's dig right in. So Paul starts this chapter with a story from February 24th, 1954. President Eisenhower, is golfing in Palm Springs, as presidents do. And the story is that he was whisked out by security in darkness to a nearby Air Force base. This had been seen by many witnesses, apparently. They had also witnessed a fleet of dark sedans that were not common in a rural area. They put 2 and 2 together, kind of checked it out. AP reports were that he'd had a heart attack and died, but in minutes after saying that, the story was retracted. So the AP did go out on the wire claiming that Eisenhower had died. But then they took it back. And the new release said, oh, he didn't have a heart attack. He went to have a tooth worked on. He had a loose crown and it was fixed in the middle of the night. So from the very beginning, this story is, as the kids say, sus. However, close sources told a completely different story. He was taken to a place on the Air Force Base where he met with ET representatives and a treaty was negotiated. Now, who are these sources? I don't know. It didn't say. Paul, when he heard the story, as many of you and I, felt skeptical, and that's healthy. That's a good thing. He said it's not logical. We have no power. We human beings have no power, not against advanced technology of superior cultures from outer space. It's laughable. I mean, come on. That's just not. Why would they even bother wasting their time negotiating? According to former Prime Minister of Russia, Medvedev, remember that Putin and Medvedev took turns being in charge. He said the Israeli, and with him, the Israeli security chief, Eshed, said that it was a many-sided negotiation, not only with different human beings represented, different countries of human beings, but also members of various ET nations, or as was referred to, the Galactic Federation. There must have been some sort of exopolitical agreement in place, Paul says, and not just a simple surrender. Assume this is a true story, then they must have made an agreement and not just a surrender, because if this is true, each faction would have a different agenda, of course, and ancient sources confirm this thing has happened before. Some ETs do want humans to survive and progress, and some want our resources and to use the people and don't really have any compassion or interest in us. Some want to help us adapt and learn how to move forward. How would we know which group had our best interests at heart? How would we know if we could trust them, if they had a hidden agenda, and which would understand us? And people often say, well, I'll believe it when I see them land on the White House lawn. What would make you think they'd pick the White House? I just, have to ask that random question. It begs to be asked. Paul, after giving this much thought and research, says that he doesn't think that Eisenhower was the first or the last. He thinks that in previous administrations, UFO sightings had spiked, and it had really intensified after the atom bomb tests, and then, of course, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And after that, there was a flurry of mass sightings, which peaked in 1952. So he suspects there was ongoing communication before even Eisenhower. So until Roswell, all of this was addressed publicly. I mean, you could pick up a paper and see, objects in the sky on the front page. And the response of the government or the military was always, well, we're going to find out what they are and we'll let you know. After Roswell, abruptly, the policy completely changed. It was no longer open. It was secrecy. There was no open pursuit of information. There was official silence. Then there was debunking and ridicule and gag orders and death threats by top brass to civilians. A story of one of the sons of one of the adult individuals involved who, peripherally as civilians knew about Roswell. And this man, this guy who was a kid at the time, tells of being grabbed by the throat and put up against a wall by a government person and threatened. And they threatened his family and his dog. They said, we won't hurt you. We'll go after the people that you care about. Traumatizing enough that as an older adult, he was still petrified. So it's kind of obvious that they'd gotten information and they felt it was not for public consumption. And this attitude, this radio silence, continued until 2017 when Chris Mellon, I believe he was Assistant Secretary of either State or Defense, I can't remember. He leaked the 2004 Tic Tac video. And if you remember, the Tic Tac video had to do with sightings off the USS Nimitz off the coast of San Diego. Tic Tac shaped objects coming out of the sky, toying with fighter jets, flying into the ocean, flying back out. All kinds of important people saw it happen. The Pentagon was forced to admit, finally, after heavy pressure, that since 1947, so for 72 years at the time of their admission, it had continuously been analyzing materials from UFO retrievals. They admitted this in public hearings, on television, and on the front page of the New York Times. In the 1940s, the National Security Act was passed. This was a paradigm-shifting piece of legislation that is not known very well. It surprises me. It doesn't get a lot of attention. It helped to found the CIA and the NSA and the mechanisms for secrecy, especially to exclude future presidents from knowledge of what they called the program. And the program was government, military, in cahoots with private contractors, collecting, studying, researching, back engineering, and allegedly, possibly interacting with UFOs and aliens. There was a need to know basis. They developed this program, and it's the program with a capital P, copied from the protocols of the Manhattan Project, which was very secret. It created a legal basis for security clearances. That's where all the fancy security clearances and the hierarchy of them came from. And it was to keep secrets about exopolitics out of the purview of Congress. And this is why when whistleblower Grosh came out in 2009, well, around that time, and did the public whistleblowing. That was a really big deal. The National Security Act, very urgently created as law in 2.5 weeks after Roswell, that should tell you something, was signed in midair on Air Force One by Truman. So Eisenhower was not the first president to know about this. So by Eisenhower's administration, the exopolitical treaties had already been underway, done by military intelligence in the Truman administration under veils of secrecy. And of course, Paul went into this thinking, okay, urban legend. You hear these kinds of conspiracy things all the time. They just proliferate around UFOs, and it's so difficult to not look a little lunatic-y. I mean, if you talk about this, people get that attitude. And, you know, Paul kind of had that attitude. This is just way too fringe and crazy to believe. And he says, even after decoding linguistics of the Bible, he was still skeptical, even though he knew for a fact that these scriptures from all around the world had been misrepresented by poor translations or editing. And he still had that little reluctance to jump in with both feet about the UFO narrative, and especially skeptical about recent encounters with ETs. He says it's easier to think about it happening in the past, but it's hard to think about it happening, you know, like last week. It makes it very real. So over his years, over his fears, he overcame his fears, and he studied the sources and he followed the logic to get to where he is today. Why I like these books, they're not emotionally driven. They're very methodical and logical approach to this. His books and his Fifth Kind TV and Paul Wallis TV have allowed him to continue receiving information that may not necessarily be revealed to everybody because people are afraid, and it has eventually he's been able to connect the past and present experiences. So December 3rd of 2020, remember 2020? Oh my God. Brigadier General Haim Eshed from Israel spoke with the Israeli national newspaper Yediot Haranot. I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. And this is what he told the newspaper. This is like the main newspaper in Israel. This is the guy that was the head of national security and secrecy. He said, yes, Israel has had a compact with the ETs. Yes, and part of it is giving them permission to do research here. And yes, this is a trade-off for interstellar technology. And this was validated by testimony given under oath to the Geospatial Intelligence Agency, AARO, and to Congress from over 40 witnesses under oath. Why is this not always on the front page? I just can't understand it. Anyway, they talked about handling metamaterials, weird materials from UFO retrievals, that they had examined entire crafts that had crash landed or whatever, that there was an active collaboration on Earth and elsewhere, for example, Mars, between ETs, the US, and Israel over the last 70 plus years. Now, this is the Israeli Brigadier General speaking. We're not excluding other countries being involved, but in the context of Israel and the United States, he's talking about. So if it's true, it's likely that the story about Eisenhower is true. And so this raises certain questions. Oh yes, a little list of questions. It was too much trouble for me to write when I could just rattle them off here. So here are the questions. Think about what you would ask. Who represents humanity at the table of galactic powers? I know who. I hope it's not. In whose interests are decisions being made? We're not a monolith, the human race. What are the various intentions of our visitors? How active a role do they play in our geopolitics? That's the real question. Our ancestors spoke of human abduction by non-human neighbors. Is that a present reality? Is it an element of the research that the Brigadier General references? And what does Haim Eshed's language of collaboration really mean? Is it a polite word for oversight or annexation or, you know, colonization or whatever? So yeah, those are just a few of the questions. I think I could come up with a few more. Government secrecy over policies that affect people in general are suspicious. And specifically, it's pretty terrifying. For example, the Australians are not allowed to know the terms of trade deals that their country makes. Why not? Now, Paul is Australian. So why not? Why can't we know? You know, you're our representatives. You're working for us. Why can't we know? Because they wouldn't be popular. But of course, you know, they have a different system of government. And I'm going to venture a guess that the representatives really don't represent the people. They represent the crown. So would the general public be horrified by deals made with ETs? Edgar Mitchell, the only voice in the wilderness for a very long time. I've talked about this guy for so many years to family and friends, and they think I make these stories up, but it's all coming out now. Edgar Mitchell tried for decades to lift the veil of secrecy. He believed that transparency would be helpful to humans and that we should know who represents us and what they're deciding about our fates. We have the right. Mitchell believed that we might have access to 0-point energy, that gravity manipulation, making energy markets obsolete, would shake up the economics of the world. And this is one of the problems. This is the technology that Tesla tried to give us before Edison shut him up. That's a whole story. Someday I've got to dig into that. Neil Armstrong in 1994 made a speech. He eventually got the courage to come out and support Mitchell. Neil Armstrong made a closely scripted and enigmatic public statement. He used the form of words which captured people's attention around the world. Now, this is what he's saying. He's saying it without saying it. He said, there are breakthroughs available. He didn't say there might be, or there could be, or there will be eventually. No, he said there will, and not some point in the future. He said breakthroughs are available. And when asked to whom or for whom, he said, to those willing to peel back one of truth's protective layers. That's interesting. You know, these people are under silence, you know, the non-disclosure and government clearances, security clearances, and they can't always say what they want to say. In videos, it's obvious that Mitchell thinks that this tech was already available. It's as much about body language as words. For example, Gary McKinnon in the UK in 2011, England refused to extradite him to the United States. He was a whistleblower who agreed with Mitchell. Now, I don't remember the exact story. There are so many, but I think that he was tootling around on a computer in some context or other and realized NASA was interacting with something, saw the videos, and he came out in public, and then, of course, all hell broke loose. There's a denial of this kind of energy breakthrough technology, and it has led to human misery, you know, just enormous cost for keeping warm and running things, and the inaccessibility of power for many people in the interest of profit and power, control power. Industries like oil and fossil fuels and the generators of electricity cobalt mining, nuclear fission. They have a negative impact on the environment and huge costs, both in money and human pain. And they would not be necessary. They would be made obsolete overnight if breakthroughs were available. In Australia, for many, the cost of power and fuel is higher than their rent or their mortgage. It's shocking. In 2020 to 2021, approximately 8,500 people in the UK froze to death at home because they didn't have the money for heat. 2020 to 2021, just under 10,000 people froze to death for lack of money. How do we justify that? 75% of old age pensions go to the heating bill. Whose interest is served in denying advanced technology the access to it? Mitchell and McKinnon called for accountability about this. Congress was angry that they'd been shut out of whatever secret stuff was going on. Military intelligence secrecy defies legislation and the legislature. Grosh brought this constitutional problem to light. I've been saying this, lots of people have been saying this. I didn't think this up on my own, but I feel it deserves to be echoed, that a large part of the problem is that the people with the information continue to withhold the information, because if the information becomes public that they have been lying and misrepresenting and appropriating taxpayer funds without accountability to Congress, a lot of people are going to be in very serious trouble. It's not only, oh, people can't handle it. There's a lot more at play here. Congress now asks, why weren't we told, and who does this secrecy serve? The public feels the same way. A global existential threat is, it's everybody's problem. So who represents us? Richard Dolan, who's got some really interesting books, wonderful books. He's not sure what I think about his work today, but his books on UFOs are fascinating. And he says that no politician really represents us. Let's see what he means by that. Okay. So most of this is quotes from him. We have a very opaque system of power in this world, which masks itself as a democracy, which is a fiction. So what is it? Is it an oligarchy? I think some oligarchs have attended Bilderberg meetings and World Economic Forum meetings. Oh, the World Economic Forum, that came up the other day. Those are the kinds of people we're talking about. Some may be too big to attend those meetings, and it's difficult territory to get into because there's no public discussion of this for obvious reasons. It's like America in the 40s. Nobody ever spoke about the mafia, even though it was clearly there. The rule was, don't discuss these things because it would implicate too many powerful people. We're exactly in the same place with global governance today. So Paul asked Richard Dolan about how this relates to technologies emerging from this program. Who are the stakeholders and the gatekeepers? He says we get a hint of an answer to that in the Davis-Wilson notes. We're talking about big money, private corporate money, major financial players who get their hooks into national governments and control them in the areas where they want to determine policy. This has been going on for years. They also have their hooks into the issue of UFO policy. And then he says, I don't think the real key to humanity as a whole, joining any kind of group that's out there I do think that the real key to humanity as a whole, joining any kind of group that's out there, will be when we master space-time manipulation. In other words, these creatures from somewhere else are holding back until we meet a certain level of technological capability. Brigadier General Ashed says the same thing in his book, The Universe Beyond the Horizon. that might be a really good book to cover. I'll have to look into it. No disclosure will happen until we understand what space is and what spaceships are, till we master space-time. And this is a vital technology that we need to participate. Like, you can't apply to college till you learn the alphabet, kind of an attitude. We are getting closer. That's the encouraging part. Now, chapter 12, Endgames and Fiefdoms. He's in Arlington, Virginia, between August and November of 2023. David Grosh, the whistleblower, is getting pushback after he filed his complaint to the Inspector General of Intelligence community and did his sworn testimony to Congress. He's hearing about it. There's a push to undermine confidence in him. If I remember correctly, we talked about this in a previous book. I want to say Bledsoe's book, but it might even have been Luis Elizondo's book. I don't know. They all kind of merge. The story is the same, coming from different directions. But Grosh was accused of improprieties of some sort, like fraud type things. I don't remember what, but they tried to besmirch his name to minimize the impact of his whistleblower testimony. Navy Chief Sean Cahill, who was part of the Nimitz airborne crew in 2004 that chased the Tic Tac UFO, defends Grosh as unimpeachable. And I think this is where we say these Navy pilots, they're sitting behind the wheel or the controls of multi-million dollar, even more than that probably, instruments, these planes. They are so minutely vetted for mental stability, personality traits. These are not the kind of people given to fantasizing or hysterical overreaction. They're cool in an emergency. They've proven they wouldn't give them this job. They would not be flying these top of the line fighter jets off of air carrier in the ocean if they didn't have the goods. When they say that they flew chasing UFOs, you kind of have to pay attention. And he says that what Grosh says is true. The leak of Grosh's medical records, oh, that's right, I'd forgotten. He had been given medication for PTSD. I have to ask, who wouldn't need medication for PTSD after years of trying to keep this stuff secret and knowing how much of a threat was over your head? This had no impact. He kept his top clearance. He kept his jobs in intelligence. And the attempt to smear him as a junkie, despite swift pushback to that lie, you know, it's ridiculous, didn't work. But someone, a leaker, was unhappy that the information was getting out about UFOs and ETs and government interaction. This really reveals the risks associated with intelligence choices and compartmentalization. It creates a vulnerability of the public and a vulnerability to safety threats and a vulnerability to blackmail and compromise. Secrecy and lies are just never a good choice. The intelligence community's existence is about keeping secrets. And they're very resistant to revealing anything at all, whether important or not, to Congress and the public. So why did the Inspector General let Grosh testify publicly? I mean, so why did he end up in front of Congress? Is this a sneaky attempt to to harm the program or to hand it over to another sort of fiefdom to keep it secret in a different way. So it's sort of damage control in a bizarre way. There was a move to discredit Grosh and turn off the lights on the secrecy and make the whole issue go away. But it's not working thanks to all the people who rallied around him, his comrades who have spoken up for him. And it's been said this investigation will continue despite skeptics and bad actors. Paul can relate. He said he suffered trauma from bad actors with personal agenda in the workplace. And I wrote in the margins, what, the clergy? No, not possible. I amuse myself when I do this, you know, a little running narrative going on here. So Paul has a dim view of these sorts of people who want to maintain lies. But Grosh was ready for it, and the whole secrecy just imploded, and it didn't serve as public warnings to protect the veil and protect the status quo. The efforts to close the curtains on all this just failed. Although I don't know, I keep saying this, I'm gonna keep saying it. Where's the outrage? Where's the public outcry? I think people are so distracted. It's the only thing I can think of. Of course, a lot of these revelations were made at the beginning of the pandemic. Interesting timing. Anyway, there's no unanimity in military intelligence. Some of those people want transparency. Some of them prefer secrecy. Some are offended by forced accountability. It challenges their authority and their existence too. I mean, if we don't need to keep secrets, we don't need secret departments. And this is the view of Sean Kirkpatrick, who at the time was the head of AARO. In 2022, he was the head of the All Domain Anomalies Resolution Office. That's AARO. And he thinks all of this is just a big, gigantic insult. Also, what needs to be mentioned, and I don't remember if Paul mentions this a little farther on, so I'm going to throw it out there while I'm thinking of it. There's a pretty sizable faction in the Pentagon and in military intelligence and in intelligence departments in the Department of Defense who are fundamentalist Christians and believe all of this is the devil. Just saying. Like if they go along with it, they're helping to bring about the prophecies in the book of Revelation. They do believe that. Okay. Kirkpatrick, the head of AARO, said this: I cannot let yesterday's hearing pass without sharing how insulting it was to the officers of the Department of Defense and the intelligence community who chose to join AARO, many with not unreasonable anxieties about the career risks this would entail of being associated with UFOs. AARO has yet to find any credible evidence to support the allegations of any reverse engineering program for non-human technology. Okay. And then he goes on to say, this is just a gigantic insult. So this is testimony of his own peers, comrades at work within the intelligence community. Luis Elizondo, we covered his book, who headed the Pentagon's Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program for a decade. Alain Joulet, the former chief of French intelligence, who corroborated Elizondo's explanation and with regard to retrievals and reverse engineering. So it's a French confirmation. Dr. James Lakatsky, who ran the Defense Intelligence Agency's iteration of the program. So there's a separate version of the program in the DIA agency, and who has acknowledged the possession and analysis of entire craft, of which David Grosh reports there are, quote, quite a number. We're not talking one or two from Roswell. Eminent astrophysicists, Dr. Jacques Vallée, Dr. Eric Davis, Professor Gary Nolan of Stanford, who on public record have gone into some detail regarding their analysis of exotic materials retrieved by the program. So Kirkpatrick's claim that his unit has yet to find any credible evidence did nothing more than illustrate the problem of compartmentalization within the intelligence community. Paul says it's ridiculous and it's embarrassing. Kirkpatrick avoided the questions. So given what has already come to light, he's had to it's hard to credit what he says, including things that have come from his own intelligence community. Maybe I already read that and I'm repeating myself. Yes, I'm repeating myself. The Pentagon put a new authority over him. And this is such a mess. I'd forgotten about this. Okay, keep in mind when this happened. This is like the early Biden administration. The Pentagon put a new authority over him, Kathleen Hicks, and she's gone. And her replacement, everybody sit down, take a deep cleansing breath, try to get your blood pressure below the red line. Her replacement is Pete Hegseth. So she explains her situation. I believe that transparency is a critical component of AARO's work. In other words, and the secrecy of this group that I'm in charge of now. And I am committed to sharing AARO's discoveries with Congress and the public, consistent with our responsibility to protect critical national defense and intelligence capabilities. So after she took over, Kirkpatrick moved on. And it's at this point, the program was in new hands. It looked promising. When do research and development findings become big enough to tell the public? That's a good question, because there's unaccounted for public money that pays for this stuff. As I've been saying, taxpayer money put into the budget by Congress with the proviso that it has to be accounted for, accounted in the sense of accountants have to go through and explain how every penny was spent. And this money goes into private aerospace corporations with no public knowledge, no government oversight, no accountability. And there's more than $9 trillion 10 years ago. So this is my question. Does this money go to subcontractors like Elon Musk? Just asking. Places like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works. This is where the money's going. Paul is pushing for journalists to go talk to the corporations. I'm not laughing at Paul. I'm laughing at the sense of futility of trying to get some sort of clarity. Elite scientists are involved at the center of this. I mean, somebody's doing this research. Some are open to speak. Jacques Vallée will speak. And Jacques Vallée of Close Encounters, he was the French professor, the French scientist who played the keyboard at the alien, at the ship. He wrote Passport to Magonia, wrote a lot of stuff. Interesting man. Astrophysicist, okay. Computer scientist, author, researcher, speaker. Eric Davis of the Wilson Davis note, which we've talked about, and I don't remember a thing I said about it. I'm sorry. We'll have to look it up. And Vallée is the living legend. He was portrayed in Close Encounters. I guess he was portrayed in the X-Files, which I never saw. I didn't ignore it. I didn't have TV. And he began looking at the effects of UFOs on human consciousness. Now, this is, to my mind, this is what's really interesting. And he now works to reverse engineer real material that they found. In 2021, he was filmed at his lab in Silicon Valley. Oh. Speaking with Paul's friend and filmmaker James Fox, with regard to the progress of the program, he said, quote, "The breakthrough has come with the invention of a machine that enables us to look at atomic structure. The material we're analyzing is not natural, and it was not manufactured with the materials that we have around us on Earth." That's scary. His colleague, the Stanford microbiologist, Dr. Gary Nolan, elaborates on the implications of what they found on technology. Quote, "I'll call it an ultra material. Somebody is putting it together at the atomic scale. We humans are building our world with 80 elements. Somebody else is building a world with 253 different isotopes." He says, "I intend to use this information to try to build something." The Wilson-Davis note. Okay, this is why I don't remember it, because I took these notes, but we haven't talked about it yet. Okay. These are the minutes of a 2002 meeting with Admiral Thomas Wilson of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, I think. And it discusses intact craft, off-planet materials made in zero-gravity environments, of materials that are not of this earth and not made by human hands. Even Admiral Wilson was not allowed full access to the information that he's talking about. He's the senior intelligence guy, so who above him said no? So in the note, he tells Eric Davis, that it's corporate types are controlling this information. Vale, Nolan, and Davis study the physical makeup of these craft. They're engineered on an atomic level, and this causes distortion in space-time. It creates a space-time bubble. So there's a whole explanation for this, and physics is not my strong point, so I did my best. The actual material of the craft creates a pocket, a stable wormhole through which the craft can pass to cross vast interstellar distances without actually having to go through space. It suggests the mind of the pilot fuses with the technology. I've read that in numerous places now. And it allows travel over thousands of light years. Quick travel. Paul wonders, what is a Nobel microbiologist doing examining the fabric of UFOs? He's just asking. We're not supposed to take this seriously, so why is this world-renowned microbiologist spending his entire life doing it? Paul refers to a lot of Star Trek, about which I know zero, that's me, but it seems like the writers get ideas from real sources. For example, Navy pilots' testimony. So he's referencing episodes of Star Trek, and it's too much to go into. And I don't really know, I'm not familiar with them. So just suffice it to say that they seem to have knowledge that's kind of special. What do corporation types plan to do with this information? Are they looking for discoveries to help people? Are they doing it outside democratic scrutiny for a reason? They've historically been involved in global war and misery, corporations. This is the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about. In fact, specifically, this UFO activity and research may be what he was talking about. And this stuff is definitely in the hands of aerospace companies. Politicians are not allowed to know. President Wilson warned us. Wilson, in the 1920s. Eisenhower came from a Mennonite background. They weren't in the military. And he was the last president, maybe, with a seat at the intergalactic table. So are we talking here about an annexation, an invasion, a colonization? Is it oversight and supervision? Is it waiting for us to develop so that they can interact with us more openly? What would the signs be, Paul asks. So he turns to ancient colonizations as told in sacred texts to get an idea, because past behavior is predictive of likely future behavior. Chapter 13, I'm kind of keeping an eye on the time here. The currency of conquerors. He's in Molokai in Hawaii in 2024. What does a covert invasion look like? So Paul sees parallels between the lived tradition of indigenous Hawaiians today and the hidden narratives in the Bible. Shift to my next. I should take out stock in this company. He agrees with his friend Cam's narrative that there were eyewitnesses. The dragon, he says, makes it easy for us to dismiss as fairy tales. You know, they talk about dragons. So, okay, come on. But that ignores the nuance of the socio-political events that are described. There are distinct parallels with many global ancestral narratives. Together, in a Venn diagram, they form a core, coherent story of human government, global human government. Our ancestors were first governed by non-humans so advanced there was no defense against them. We were putty in their hands. Clay. They eventually passed on the control to the noble families for succession of power and leadership. So these beings came to Earth, originally colonized, delegated, and left. Human history of invasion and colonization mirrors the behavior of these original colonizers. The arrivals and invasions by force and control, with laws and education, police and military to implement the control. We grab the right to rule. We establish money, a banking system, an economic system, a trade system. We make the natives of wherever, I'm talking about humans in history, make the natives of whatever we've invaded, make them the public servants. And when we leave, we take claim to the resources, the profits, and the ultimate control. We shape international relations and trade from afar and have a distant military outpost if needed. Think about the U.S. presence in the Middle East from far away. Just ignore like immediate current events. We're talking up until now. This is what it was like. And he's saying that the way that, for example, the Spanish acted, the Spanish and the Portuguese, when they went to the New World, what the ETs have done with us mirrors that. Cam's story, this is the Hawaiian friend, is more direct. He calls it an invasion. He doesn't mince words, and a colonization, and it's not a metaphor, as the Bible is often taken as a metaphor, but maybe it's just plain story, truth. The newcomers often come guns blazing, physically threatening, being militaristic with weapons of phenomenal destructive power unfamiliar to the natives. And this is common to most ancient origin stories. But there were some that weren't violent, that were benevolent. They came to teach humans skills to live on the land, how to farm, how to build, how to live with nature. And they helped humans make socio-evolutionary leaps, city building, community building. Some hint that they may have lived on Earth a long time before helping humans. Others directly are linked to coming from the stars. Probably we have different stories because we were visited a number of different times and in a number of different places by a number of different civilizations, different species with different cultural agendas. And these long ago experiences were conflated into a single narrative for modern Christians. Likely there's many layered stories, all possible, all possibilities. And there were shifts also in their behavior towards us. And Paul, of course, uses the Bible as an example because, that's his thing. He talks about a draconian government. Draconian is an interesting word. It comes from the word for dragon. And there was actually a leader, Draco, somebody who is draconian, does extreme things, often to his own detriment. Draco won the war, but lost all of his military. They sacrificed his entire military for the sake of winning a small battle. So a draconian move is something that's self-destructive ultimately. So we have a draconian government. It's a top-down hierarchy with a servile population at the bottom. The Dark Enlightenment, for example. The Mayans in the Popol Vuh talk about dragon serpents with wings that make the population do all the hard work. It's a social order that's enforced with violence. The same with Yahweh and his peers. They were described as dragons and reptiles, reptilian sorts. They used people for work to bring sacrifices, supplies. This is the same as most global class structures and their stories, their origin stories. Power and wealth flows upward to the few on the top, and the lower downs give to the higher ups and serve them. And this is a hierarchy maintained by force and violence. It's still how we maintain social cohesion. The threat of dispossession, eviction, for example, foreclosure. That's one example of it. The threat of incarceration and death. The manipulation of currency. Now, this is a topic that we could discuss quite a bit. People at the bottom always are dispossessed through tax, tithing, and tribute. Bring the best of your harvest to the temple, that kind of thing. The moment we agreed, Cam said, the moment we agreed with the value of their tokens, which they called money, from that moment on, we lost our freedom. That was really how they enslaved it. And this is how he describes his ancestors' unwitting surrender to the sovereignty of the colonizers, accepting their money. It was not a mutually beneficial arrangement. He said colonizers controlled the money, the amount, the value, and therefore they didn't have to use as much physical violence because they already had a powerful weapon in the money. Is that so different from how we order our society today? We too have to work for money without any control over the value of that money. It is depreciated every single year that we work for it. He says, hence, where I live in Australia in the 1960s, and this is an important fact, we all would echo this. In the 1960s, a working father could buy a house for his family, provide holidays, support his wife at home with the children, pay for their college education, expect to retire in comfort, all on the basis of a single income, his own, on an average wage. In 1966 in Australia, the average house price was 1.6 times the average household annual income. This was at a time when most households existed on a single income. What that meant was if a married couple were to work full-time on average incomes in an average house, allowing for the fact that at that time women were paid significantly less than men, they could own that home outright within 2 to 3 years. Try doing that today. In 2023 in Australia, the average house price was 7.6 times the average household annual income, bearing in mind that 2/3 of those households are dual income. Roughly speaking, the average household today has to make 13 times the financial commitment to buy a house compared to 1966, the year when property ownership peaked in Australia. What has changed is not the number of hours in the week, nor the work ethic of the country's citizens. It's the value of the currency that's changed. And what I often like to comment about, he says in the Bible, Jesus railed against taxation, also interest, but against taxation. Some people use crypto as an alternative that can't be controlled by the government. In Australian banks, they're required to ask what the money you take out of your own account is going to be used for. So whose money is it really? And I don't think that was necessarily him advocating crypto. I think he was making the observation that this is why it is popular with some people. So to paraphrase, Jesus asks the people, who do you think pays this tax? The elite? The children of the elite? Of course not. The elite and their children are exempt. No, these taxes are for the masses to pay and for the elite to receive. He says this is from Matthew 17 and 22, paraphrased. Money to the wealthy from the poor, the polarization of interests. Then he talks about proxy wars. When leaders disagree, they get ordinary people to do the fighting for them, and they're just the collateral damage. Ordinary people don't usually have the beef. I thought it said beer. I'm like, what? They don't usually have, they're not, ordinary people are not the ones who start the fights most of the time. And he cites the Christmas truce in 1914 when the two opposing sides across the trenches from each other came out and played soccer and sang Christmas carols on Christmas. Just young kids, sent off as cannon fodder. They didn't want to fight. Neither side wanted to fight. I think the British or the French heard the Germans singing Christmas carols and tentatively ventured out, and they had a truce for a day. The real disagreement is usually always between the geopolitical elites, the rulers. They don't care how many people die. They don't really want peace. Even Nag Hammadi Gnostic texts warn of the archons, the leaders. Archons can be described as parasitic, non-human, energy-based entities which feed off the heavier emotional energy of organic life. They intrude on the health of human beings, arousing anxiety, paranoia, and aggression, leading to negative behaviors and potentially a cycle of aggression, fear, and despair, upon which the archons can then feed. Accordingly, the favorite sport among archons was manipulating human leaders into warfare. And this appears in older writing as well, not just the Nag Hammadi. The writer of Kings in the Bible, Hebrew scriptures, records a moment in which Micaiah, a man known for a shamanic ability in far sight, succeeds in remote viewing the machinations of the El Ba'adat. There he witnesses a conversation in which the non-human parties sitting in council, this is the cosmic council, I'd forgotten what that meant. So he overhears what's going on. And they're having a conversation. The non-human parties agree to manipulate one particular nation to get it to invade another country on the basis of false intelligence. Clearly, the Hebrew scribe who carefully penned the story hoped that future readers would be alert enough to recognize that any threat of such a manipulation happening then could happen in our own generation. It's a story that deserves a higher profile in the present day. So he says we need to be aware of the signs of archonic control. And that will be the end of video number 5. We're at the end of the chapter, the end of chapter 13. This is great stuff. I mean, I love Paul's books, but I think this is the crux of the whole thing, this control and a structure, of economic, social structure of control across many millennia. Yeah. By the time this video goes up, I'm hoping to have recorded a discussion with Dr. Harriet Fraud of the women's movement fame. She's been on our channel before. A lovely person and very engaged in social issues. And I'm going to kind of ask her some of this stuff, see what she thinks. So you might want to check that out. In the meantime, check out behind the door my membership, 99 cents. And the easiest way to join is to go to a laptop, because sometimes you can't do it on a phone. I don't understand why. I couldn't even figure it out when I was trying to join some people's channels, and they told me you have to go to a bigger device. And what else can I tell you? Oh, if you would like to have me do reading for you, let me know. And if you have a question or you'd like to maintain anonymity, send it to my email and I'll address it anonymously on my Substack, Ask Your Irish Granny. I just put up a little story about parades there you might want to look at. It's free. And you can access that on a laptop as well. There is a phone app. I haven't figured it out yet. And I actually have a site that I write on and put videos on. Also, check out my video with Deborah Lupien about a deeper dive into the Valerie Percy murder. That was interesting. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back with video number 6. And in the meantime, Slángafoil. Slánge.